Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania has now officially released in theaters worldwide. Or maybe not worldwide, but at least, I got to see it. So I went to the theater today and I sat down and I watched this movie, our latest MCU film, the kickoff to Phase 5 of the MCU. And this movie has been kind of controversial, surprisingly. We all thought, third Ant-Man movie, it should be an absolute banger. Everything we've seen from the trailer looks amazing. But then the reviews start coming out, and it's not great. This is one of the lowest rated MCU movies of all time. It's second worst next to Eternals, which is weird. Now, that didn't necessarily deter me from this. It didn't make me go oh no, I don't want to watch it anymore. I still want to go see it. And same thing happened with Eternals, where that movie, everybody said it was bad. It got terrible reviews. I actually ended up liking that movie. And the same thing is the case here, once again, for Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. I genuinely don't understand where all the hate is coming from and why it got such a low Rotten Tomatoes score. So anyway, this is going to be my non-spoiler review of Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. If you haven't seen it yet, you can go ahead and stick around, check out this review, hear my thoughts on it. If you have seen it, then go ahead and watch it as well. And I will get my spoiler review out hopefully tomorrow, probably not until at least tomorrow, but I'm really excited to do that video as well. So non-spoiler thoughts, Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, let's do this. So this movie is actually really enjoyable. I had a lot of fun with it, and that could honestly be because my expectations were lower due to the bad reviews and the low Rotten Tomatoes score. That could definitely be the case, and I definitely feel like was probably a factor into it, but I really like this movie. And the thing is, one of the biggest complaints I've been hearing about this is because the MCU has lost its magic. In this movie, it doesn't feel like an Ant-Man movie. At least that's what people are saying. And to me, I would say it does feel like an Ant-Man movie, but definitely a different kind of Ant-Man movie. Obviously, the first two movies were much lower scale. They just took place in San Francisco. They were very grounded stories for these characters. But then this one, you go full sci-fi, fantasy, epic adventure. You go deep into the quantum realm, explore this universe. Definitely huge Star Wars vibes from this whole film. There were actually moments where I was like, oh, that looks like that could literally be from a Star Wars movie. But I didn't mind that, though. I do think overall that I do prefer the smaller scale adventures for a character like Ant-Man. But that doesn't mean I didn't like this movie. I still really enjoyed this for what it was. Because going along with that, another big complaint I've heard is that this just feels like it's here to set up a bunch of stuff for the future. And that is definitely something that it does. I mean, we literally have Kang the Conqueror in this movie and a whole bunch of other things that are being set up for the future. But I still feel like aside from those things, it still feels like a good, solid, quality Ant-Man MCU movie. Because Paul Rudd, of course, is front and center as Scott Lang. You get his relationship not only with Hope Van Dyne, but now in this film, you have his grown-up daughter, Cassie Lang, played by Catherine Newton, which I really enjoyed Catherine Newton in this movie, although I will admit I still don't get the point of recasting Emma Fuhrmann from Avengers Endgame. I think she would have done great as well. So we get that dynamic and that relationship in this film. That's kind of what drives Ant-Man's motivations throughout the whole movie. So I really enjoyed Ant-Man. I enjoyed Wasp. Wasp really didn't have a whole lot to do. Hank Pym really didn't do a whole lot either. But the two standouts for this film for me, one is Michelle Pfeiffer, just because I wasn't expecting her to have a huge role, but obviously it makes sense when you really think about it in hindsight. I mean, the fact that she was in the quantum realm for 30 plus years, they just got her back and saved her and rescued her from the quantum realm in Ant-Man and the Wasp. So with her being here now and them going back to the quantum realm, she's the expert, so it makes sense that she would have such a huge role. And some of her flashbacks with Jonathan Majors as Kang, I think, were really, really interesting and really goes to show you how great of an actress Michelle Pfeiffer is. But that, of course, brings me to the big highlight of this film, which is the one thing I agree with that most reviewers and critics are saying about this film. Jonathan Majors is amazing as Kang the Conqueror. We got a first glimpse of him as He Who Remains in the Loki Disney Plus series, and now this just takes it up to the whole next level. Jonathan Majors on full display as the Kang the Conqueror, and he he is a conqueror. He is a great villain here. As many people have been saying, he is on par with Thanos, possibly if not even better than Thanos was in Infinity War and Endgame. I mean, the one thing I do wish that we got from him is that we got more backstory and development on his origins. You get hints at it and teases of like where he came from, why he is here in the quantum realm, why he's been exiled. But I feel like that is something they'll probably save for later down the line. They'll probably develop that more in Avengers: The Kang Dynasty, similar to how Infinity War Endgame, well, Infinity War more so was more of a Thanos movie than an Iron Man movie or Captain America movie. So I think Kang Dynasty will be more of a focus on Kang rather than the Avengers themselves. Now, as for the other villain of this movie, which has been also one of the big centers and focal points of controversy for this film, is MODOK. So we finally get our live-action MCU debut of MODOK, the mental organism designed only for killing. And a lot of people have been saying he looks ridiculous, the CGI is bad, he looks terrible, it's not comics accurate, and I could not disagree more. First of all, when it comes to the CGI, I think the CGI in this film is really great. I think there were very few moments in this movie where I thought the CGI didn't look good, and MODOK is no exception. Like, his design, I'm not going to give away who he is just for spoiler reasons. I know that most people already know already. I know I knew going into this, but I'm not going to spoil his identity. But we see him with the mask on and without the mask on. And with the mask on, he's a very metallic, robotic-looking creature, and that's mostly what we've seen of him in the trailers. I think that was definitely a really cool, unique take on the character, new, interesting design to make him look more scary and menacing. So I think that worked really well for the character. And then when he does take off the mask, yes, he looks ridiculous. Yes, he looks weird. Yes, he looks disgusting. Yes, he looks silly, but that's how he's supposed to look. Really, like, what were you people expecting MODOK to be this big, scary villain? And he does have some really cool action sequences in this film, but I don't really know what people were expecting from MODOK in this movie when MODOK just was MODOK. And he doesn't have a huge role. For the most part, he's just a henchman for Kang, which is probably another thing people are upset about, which I also don't get, because I grew up watching MODOK in various Marvel cartoons, and every single one, he was a henchman. Iron Man, the animated series, he was a henchman for the Mandarin. Avengers Assemble, henchman for the Red Skull. And most importantly, the Superhero Squad show, he was a henchman for Doctor Doom alongside Abomination as well. So I fully got from this film of MODOK what I wanted to get from this film of MODOK. And really, everything going on here in this movie is what I expected and what I wanted to get. There wasn't anything huge missing, except one thing I will mention that I missed. I talked about earlier in the video about how I do prefer probably the smaller scale adventures for Ant-Man. And if we do get an Ant-Man 4, I do want it to go back to that smaller scale. One of the biggest things I missed was Luis. No Michael Pena. Michael Pena is not in this movie. We have no Luis. He was one of my favorite parts of the first couple movies, so I was really disappointed to not see him here. But we do have at least David Dastmalchian brought back as a different character, Veb. He's one of the freedom fighters in the quantum realm. The freedom fighters, they weren't hugely necessary, but I thought they were interesting additions. I think Veb was a really funny character. He was kind of like the Korg of the quantum realm, so I thought that was quite interesting. But yeah, guys, I really enjoyed this. I really had a lot of fun with this movie. At this time, I don't think I could realistically rank this film among the first two Ant-Man movies, because again, I don't feel like it's really a fair comparison, because I love those two movies, but for very different reasons than I love this movie, because this is a big sci-fi epic fantasy adventure, whereas those are smaller scale stories set in San Francisco. So if you haven't seen it yet, of course, make sure to go check out in theaters and watch Marvel Studios' Ant-Man the Wasp Quantumania. You know, the reviewers, the critics, they're all saying it's bad. It's really not bad. Does it have a few minor problems, which I will talk about in my spoiler review? Yes, of course it does. But every movie is going to have problems. No movie is perfect, and I really enjoyed it. So just go into this with an open mind, and just have fun. Just have fun with Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. And again, stay tuned for that spoiler review. I'll also be breaking down the post-credit scenes. There's 2 post-credit scenes, so stay tuned for those through the credits. But Anyways, guys, let me know your non-spoiler review thoughts in the comments below about Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. If you saw it, if you haven't seen it yet, what are you most excited to see? For now, guys, thanks so much for watching. Please drop a like if you enjoyed this video and hit the subscribe button so I can keep you up to date on everything that goes on in the Marvel life.